All right, we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Facilitating XYZ Live. My name is Sam Killerman. I'm one of the co-facilitators of Facilitating XYZ, co-authors of Unlocking the Magic of Facilitation, and an all-around facilitation geek. I'm really excited. This is the first episode in our second season of this show. We've done 16 episodes with almost 16 different facilitators. We've had a few different second part guests, or round two guests, but a lot of different folks have come through this this Google Hangout over the past year and a half, Meg? Year and a half?
Yeah.
For the last little while. And this is number 17, and we're really excited. So season 2 for us is not necessarily a formal difference. It's just a difference in process. We're going to be switching up from doing one episode every month or so to doing about 10 different interviews this week, and this is the first of those interviews. So I'll let Meg introduce herself, and then Solomon introduce yourself in just a second.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Meg Bolger. I am the co-host of this show, Facilitating XYZ, and a co-facilitator of Facilitating XYZ, and so excited to finally be getting back to talking to facilitators. This is my favorite form of professional development that I have found so far, of like ways to connect with other people who do work that I'm really passionate about and get to kind of pick their brain for 2 hours. So we're going to get into that in a moment. And we're going to start by just asking you, Solomon, if you would mind just kind of telling us who you are and introducing yourself to our listener, viewer peoples.
Hi, everyone. Let's see, I still think I am discovering who I am. So phase after what I would consider a very blessed and exciting journey. I have spent the last 25 plus years working as an educator and an educator trainer, facilitating the learning in classrooms and for educators. I've spent almost about the same amount of time in the field consulting and facilitating small and large groups of folks, in supporting them in becoming more excellent in their relationships and thus the work that they're doing. And then have also spent some time in the field of what's called interactive rhythm. I've studied West African and percussion West African and Brazilian percussion for about 20 plus years. And that's just a hobby that I love, and also have brought that into the professional work through facilitating. So I would consider myself someone who facilitates groups in such a way that people can get up and do the stuff. So it's going to be kind of funny to just talk for a while here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, we can, I mean, if there's something you want us to get up and do, we are willing participants.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to be a part of this, you guys. I'm honored.
Well, we're excited to have you. We're honored as well. Solomon, can you tell me a little bit more about, like, what was your life that got you into that work? So into the facilitating groups work, the 25 years, what was happening before that? Like, what led you to that?
Good question. So let's see. The impetus, I think, came out of just a desire that I've always had to be an educator, to be a classroom teacher. And I've taught from preschool all the way up to community college. And the process of doing that, what would be considered a somewhat standard teacher training program, except for the fact that all of my mentors and the place that I got student teaching happened at an amazing alternative school in Michigan, where a cousin of mine, who's also a mentor, was really pioneering new ways of internal genius rather than just the standard. And I believe the realizing that there was this other subgroups called facilitation, which I consider to be the drawing out of, which, you know, as I understand, the core of what the Latin root is, rather than to information into and stuff into. The sparks began, and then I grew and got to have the blessing of connecting with other mentors, would begin to watch people and the way that they would work a room and work a group. Not so much in, you know, the entertainment element of it, but the way that the participants to bring who they were into the experience to create a richer learning process. And when that was happening as a participant, that would always spark me. And so it would stay in my mind of like, okay, how did they do that? That helped. So whenever I was in, though I did have curricula and objectives that I had to bring forward as part of my job, I was always, how do I get the participants to engage, not just engage here, but engage physically, engage from the heart, engage with their own emotionally in the process. So to me, those elements all came together, and the more I would talk to people about that, the more they would say, oh, well, you should come work with us and watch what we do, and we work with this group. And then I got to understand that there's this thing called facilitation. I didn't even really know that that was a gig or a title or a role.
Yeah, I think that's so true for so many of us, is the, like, what, there's a thing that is what has been, like you said, sparking me or kind of catching my interest, and there's like an actual thing that I can access through like a word or a language or a way of doing it, which I think is really exciting. Solomon, one of the things, so before we dig any further, what you were lagging just a little bit for me, which like I caught 90% of what you said, but I was like wanting to catch the other 10%. At the top of your screen, when you hover over your own face or my own face, is there an option up top for you to go low bandwidth?
It's like four little bars. I'm gonna do it as
they were there before, but there are no bars here now.
Okay. I wonder if, I don't know if I can have it. I wonder if
you have it, Sam, or is it just me?
I have the bars, but I can't seem to. Oh, I can't adjust them.
You can? Okay. Yeah, so Solomon, if you like move your mouse over the screen, hopefully like over the, they pop up. Can you drop that down to low bandwidth?
Sure. Like all the way down?
So all the way down means we won't see your face. But like there should be like different amounts, and like if you were at high, like drop it to medium, or if you were at medium, drop it to low, just like one notch.
How does that sound now? Is that more real time?
You look pixelated from the 90s, but your audio is there.
One more notch and we can try that.
Okay.
So for all of our listeners or those watching right now, this is called facilitating technology, and this is just part of the deal, man. It's just part of the flow.
It is. It's unfortunately part of our flow.
Yeah, any good facilitator knows that improv, you have to make friends with improvisation to become an excellent facilitator, because that's part of, in my experience, what helps groups move forward is someone who can hold the space that's open-ended enough to say, hey, this is what's real, this is what's happening right now. We have to embrace this. What do we do? So anyway, there you go. How's that working?
It sounds good. I mean, that whole, Meg, did you get all that?
Yeah, I got 100% of that. So I'm feeling hopeful.
I love that you even just said something that I want to dig into, which is you were talking about how when you were facilitating, or when you started to see facilitation as maybe a separate or a complementary thing to education, you would still have to follow the curriculum, or you'd still have to like live up to those formal job expectations, or and what you just said in many ways is what's always created conflict for me, is that idea of facilitation is so improvisational, or it's so responding to a group. Can you speak to, like, in your work, so as you started to notice these two different things, like both the education and maybe that is kind of a formal concept, and started to learn more about facilitation, any conflicts that you noticed between them, maybe the lack of being able to improvise, or any others that that created some friction as you started to learn more about facilitation?
Sure. Good question. It's a very multidimensional, multifaceted question. So I'm going to try to be as concise as possible while touching on some of the variables here. I think one of the things that first comes up when you say that is time. And the reason I say time is because time is typically the biggest conflict I have to honoring the flow of a group and also honoring my commitment to deliver a particular deliverable, an objective or a learning concept. Because in my facilitation flow, what I want to be able to do is find where the group is and for the group to jump on to an inspiring learning process where they're unearthing what's coming out in the experience, and where I might steer from time to time to help move towards that objective or that particular concept. But really, in a time situation, sometimes that's just not possible, because I have to then be accountable to whoever hired me to say, yeah, we hit that objective in the amount of time that I was given. And rewind from that, these days, whenever I do get hired to do something, I'm very clear and honest now about, wow, you want to do this in this much time, and I want to be with you that we're going to touch on that. We're going to do education and skill development. We won't necessarily have, habits change or thought processes shift by the time they enter the room amount of time. So I think the first conflict is time. And then the second piece is looking at the difference between presenter and facilitator. And one of my facilitator mentors, an incredible world-class facilitator, her name is Vanessa Stone, is often very clear about the difference between a presenter and a facilitator, in that a presenter really doesn't talk too much. The overall energy, flow, and dynamic that's happening in the group, because the group is an organism. The presenter is really more there to ensure that the information gets across, and an excellent presenter will do it with energy and with humor and with whatever techniques can help the group stay engaged, but they're not necessarily wanting to see the group transform in front of their eyes, right? Whereas a facilitated process, to me, is more about having the group have some kind of transformation by the end of the experience. So again, we come back to, when I look at time, I have to kind of bounce back and forth between presenter and facilitator, and that's another conflict for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that issue of time, and I want to dig more into whether that's now or later, that idea of how you talk to people who are hiring you about, like, I see you want transformational change. I hear you want it in a half an hour, and those are not going to happen at the same time. So, like, which one's going to give, the transformational change or the half hour? Which I think is all too often the conversation we end up having.
Yeah, I wrote down a note to dig into that later too, Meg. So
can I say something about that that's sparking for me right now as you say that? One of the things that does help ability to facilitate as much transformation, quote unquote, as possible in the shortest period of time is Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, man. Like, that's like a toolkit, because as many ways as I can have the information coming out is as many ways as I can engage who's ever in the room in such a way that some facilitated process can start to unfold. And particularly for me, it's kinesthetic. Like, as much as I can do to authentically have a group doing stuff, that makes all the difference in them actually having some kind of transformation, because they're relating with the information more whole body rather than just head.
Right. So, Solomon, I'm catching 100% of what you're saying, but you're still lagging for me. Can you drop it down just one more notch, and then we will call it a day on that on that piece of technology?
Full 8-bit video game interview. You're gonna have an alternate ego as a.
Yeah, it's just like 1996 video games.
Yeah.
All right, going down one more notch. There we go.
Awesome. Brings me back.
Brings me back. It does. It reminds me. Do you ever play video games?
Not anymore, but you know, like I left video games back in the day of like, you know, asteroids and Pac-Man and
The classics.
yeah, the classics.
So Solomon, before we, like, you've already given us so many things that I want to dig into, but one thing before we kind of move into more background of facilitation is just, so you said that you have done pre-K through community college, and like what are the spaces that you kind of started your educational journey in, and then like can you walk us like a quick timeline of like, these are the ways I started doing education and this is how it transformed up to what I do today?
Wow. Let's see if I can do that in a short period of time. If we go way, way back, I'm originally from Jamaica. That's where I was born. I think there was just something innate. I think it was just one of those gifts, one of those natural sparks that I had, that I always wanted to help younger children. And so from the earliest memories that I have, I would be walking around the classroom helping either my peers who didn't understand what was going on, or checking out of my classroom and volunteering in a lower classroom for lower grades to help them learn what was going on. So I think that's where that educator piece emerged. And then, of course, I did the classic, you know, summer camp counselor situation, wherever I could be where young people and youth were, and also make a little money doing it. That's what I would be seeking out, because it was always inspiring to me. So it moved from being in the education realm. When I graduated, I knew that I wasn't going to make it really long term in any public school situation because I was going to get too crazy. But I was able to jump into doing curriculum development and design, and I did that for a while for families who were doing homeschooling. And worked doing for the state of Colorado a whole curriculum development and design program for adult learners, which were mostly young people who couldn't track in the regular high school situation. And then out of that curriculum development came then training for the educators. Meanwhile, what was happening was my own desire to explore adventure learning, and how does that tie into learning, and what do we do with outside learning, and what are kinesthetics. And so all of that kind of came together as I connected with folks who were doing more organizational development work. And all of these pieces of my background seemed to link beautifully. And I did it more on just the sense of, don't scare me. I much work better with kids, but I knew that it was going to be something that would stretch me. So that's how I ended up in the organizational development realm, was like, all right, I'm going to take on the ability to work with adults and do it effectively and grow myself in the process. I think I kind of answered the question.
I thought so. I think that was great.
Yeah, me too. How many places have you lived, Solomon? I just heard like 6 in that.
Let's see.
Born in Jamaica.
Atlanta, Michigan, Colorado, Arizona, Texas.
So just not the Pacific Northwest?
Been a year in California too.
Nice.
Awesome.
I love the Pacific Northwest. I visit there often.
So you said that you find adults intimidating and were drawn towards kids or youth. And I find that to be the reverse of many folks that I encounter, where they're like, adults, awesome. Children scare me. They're too real, or they're too energetic, or there's something, right? But there's some fear, especially like youth, like teens, maybe perhaps most of all. But what is it that, like, for you, I would love to know, like, what either drew you towards youth, or like what intimidates you about adults?
Well, I'm not intimidated by adults anymore. It was early on in my experience, before I'd had this much experience working with adults. Mm-hmm. I can say what intimidated me then was perhaps what the strength is that I had with youth, which is the ability to just get real. And that in hanging out with young people and children, there is such a natural flow of authenticity that I feel comfortable with. That in working with adults, the social persona has to get so jacked up sometimes that's what made me feel uncomfortable. So I had to find my way with being as authentic as I could in spaces with adults where adults would just be like, "Whoa, I'm not sure I want to go there." That was the most intimidating piece for me. And so learning how to do that in such a way that there was an invitation rather than a confrontation with adults has been a key piece of it, because ultimately I feel like I can't serve a group if I'm trying to get them to like me, or pretending something about myself or them, or ignoring what's really going on in the room. And so it's really been the growth process of how to do that. With young people, it's been more innate for me to just be able to get real, just break it down.
Yeah, that makes
What were the first? Yeah, it makes sense to me too. What were the first, like, or maybe what was the first big learning lesson that you encountered when you were looking at the difference between inviting authenticity and confronting adults with authenticity? Like, what was a light bulb moment for you in the beginning of that? Because that sounds like something I struggle with on a pretty regular basis.
I wish that I could notate a light bulb moment. I think it was more just the ongoing growth process for me, that I started to understand more and more how much wanting to be liked by the group was impacting negatively my ability to support the group in doing the work they needed to do. And so it was more that, and being just growing up and being able to just sit in myself, and also my own personal journey of reflection. And again, it's cliche to say it, but it's like, you know, I can't take a group further than I've gone in my own work. And so realizing the power of having to keep myself on my own personal development edge, that's how I serve a group more, because then I can be more comfortable with discomfort because I'm doing that work internally. So it wasn't really a light bulb moment, more than I could start seeing more and more as I got comfortable with the group being uncomfortable, or being able to say to the group, hey, this is what's happening. It's not wrong or bad. Let's just take a moment to look at this. I get it's uncomfortable. And if I'm comfortable with the discomfort, that invitation to the group is much more authentic than me kind of going, well, I don't know what to do with this. I can feel it, and everybody else can feel it, and I don't even know how to name it. You know, like that is like, to me, that was like facilitator hell.
Oh, man.
Get to the end of the experience and go, wow, it was so tough. And my mentors would be able to help me reflect on that, or talking to people who knew me more would help me grow into that, you know?
What? The facilitator hell thing, I was just like, oh God, we could have a whole follow-up conversation about what that looks like. But what you were saying right at the beginning of like groups, the want of a facilitator for the group to like them. Like as soon as you said that, I was like, I have too much of that going on. I already know, like, I know that that's like a really present problem. And I also hear you on the, like, the light bulb moment is challenging to locate, because it often does happen so incrementally. But I'm wondering, is there like a story or a time where you can remember debriefing with your mentors, or where you were like, I don't want to do that again, and in order to not do that, I have to care less about what they think of me? Like, does that make sense, that
Right.
question?
Let me see if I can think of a moment. And I should clarify that it's not that I want a group to dislike me.
Agreed.
I want to be very aware and model to the best of my ability, being aware of my impact. And at the same time, it's also, if I'm called into a group, I mean, I consider myself part of the organism. And at the same time, really, I'm not there to entertain the group, unless that was the agreement. Like, I'm here to entertain, right? But I don't take those kinds of gigs. I take the gigs where it's like, the group has work that they want to do, and I want to be a catalyst in supporting that work. And so what I'm okay with is if the group hits an uncomfortable moment and they're looking at me like, dude, you're supposed to be the one that's helping to make this feel all good, And I can stand in myself and go, I am willing to support, and this is the group dynamic. The dynamic that's present in the room was not something I brought here, but I'm feeling it too. And he does feel uncomfortable. So let's dig in here. Let's remember our safety agreements. Let's come back to some of the core skills that we have and start really bringing those into the dynamic here so that we can move this forward. And that if a group leaves an experience and spirits feel like, man, that was work, I came up to the edge of my fear, or there was a tough conversation that happened and it wasn't as skillfully executed as I would like or they would like, that I have to be able to stand in. We were in some learning territory, and it doesn't always feel comfortable and good in that territory. So that's what I feel like, you know, is some of them not letting the group like me, so I don't tie it up with a nice bow and hand it back to them, and it's like, wasn't that great? We had fun. Woo. It's great when that happens authentically. And I have become more and more skilled at closing a process so people do have a sense of closure when they walk out of a room. But it isn't necessarily always the pretty package. It might be more work that needs to be done. It might be more skills to develop around tough conversations. It might need to be, we're going to pause and take a break and come back. In those kinds of things. Again, just the sense of comfort with discomfort. I think I strayed away from your question though, Meg.
Well, I think that was helpful, and I think that makes sense. I think that there's probably, rather than straying away from it, I just think it'll probably come back and get weaved in throughout what we're going to be talking about.
I remember a moment where I reflected on that with mentors or a team, and we talked about what went down.
Yeah, I mean, a specific, like, yeah, that was the question.
Sure. I think I had the opportunity to work as core staff with some world-class facilitators, training community health educators. Okay. And the model of that particular program was designed so that the facilitation team was as much in the learning as the educators that were there getting the information and upping their own facilitation and teacher and educator skills. And so that stands out to me as, because at the end of the day, we would give each other real feedback on our sessions. We were all in each other's plenary sessions, and we understood signing up for this. This is also PD for me. And so, and it was honest feedback. Now, people weren't being mean or mean-spirited, but if I did something in the facilitation moment where I went more for the gag or went more for the good feeling rather than staying in a moment of discomfort or calling something out in the group that I was experiencing or holding the group to do the heavy lifting that it wasn't doing and I missed that, the facilitators would give me that feedback of like, man, that was happening right there and you shied away from it. What was going on for you there? Or this is what I noticed, you kind of chewed up your words over here. Were you feeling uncomfortable about saying what you were saying there? Or I noticed you didn't hit this particular objective. You like, it was so much an opportunity to reflect. Mm-hmm. I would say that those processes to this day are still some of the most potent learning experiences that I've had around that. And it was a safe enough group and a mature enough and an experienced enough group that we could really hold each other's learning. And you know, like my underarms would be just sweating. Like I would just feel that sense of just like redness, like, oh yeah, I messed that up. You know, and it wasn't like I was being criticized before a jury. It was my peer group was there going, yeah, bro, we know how that feels. And next time you can step up to this one. You got it. You got this. You know, like here's what you could do differently next time. And we're in the room and we got your back. And that's just powerful. Facilitating facilitators, man, that takes people who are egoless and willing to see each other shine and are just there for each other's, you know, rising up. So that's I don't remember a specific one of those, but all of those compound to really support And I did one of those last year too, which was no, this spring, another one of those happened. So that's a forum that I will forever be deeply grateful for.
What do you think? Yeah, so you hit on that idea of kind of like meta facilitation, right? Like somebody creates that space so that facilitators are able to learn from one another. It's vulnerable, it's underarm sweating, it's all the things you described, and it leads to really positive outcomes. So there's that side of it. There's some magic going on, and then there's also what the individual facilitators bring to the space that allows them to learn or allows them to step into that discomfort, you know, amongst their peers, not just in front of the plenary sessions or the participants or the educators.
Yeah.
So with that second part, like, what do you think it takes for you as the individual facilitator to benefit from that space? Like, what do you have to go in your head? Like, what agreements you have to make with yourself? Or you even mentioned, like, we made an agreement. We're stepping into this space. We're knowing we're going to get this feedback. Like, what does the individual have to do to benefit from a space like that?
So if I understand your question, you're talking more about my own internal preparation or receptivity to being in that context. Is that the question?
Yep, and learning from it instead of just having it overwhelm you or put up your guard or never want to go back to that space.
And I won't lie, there are definitely moments where I was just like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. But the overarching, you know, and I think this just comes back to myself and us as human beings, is that, who was it, Aristotle or one of those dudes that said seventh life is not worth living, you know, Plato or Aristotle. So I think it comes really back down to that it's I have a desire to grow as a human being and a willingness to be seen in my humanity, not having it right or not being perfect, and been in that journey long enough to be able to get vulnerable, and be okay with that level of vulnerability and authenticity. And I've also been blessed to just be around facilitators who I watch do that, and through doing that, I see the impact that they have. So for me, it's also like, well, if I want to get that good, I have to get that willing. You know, I have to be willing to not have the right answer, and to check my ego, and to stand so strongly in myself that if I make a mistake that's public, I can recover from it by just simply knowing at heart, I trust who I am and the integrity of my being. And that, all that is just personal, that's just personal work. You know what I mean? That's doing whatever practices one needs to do to be able to be in that level of relationship with oneself and surround oneself with people where the conversations and the practice of that muscle is an ongoing part of life.
That was, I love that you said to get that good, you have to get that willing. I think I want that on a bumper sticker, because I think that's just like it's beautiful and potent. One thing that I'm thinking about, and it seems to be a reoccurring theme, Solomon, is that a lot of what you're talking about and a lot of what you're mentioning is kind of an evolution over time, right? And that, like, time has been a huge educator in helping you sink more into yourself, be better able to stand in with a group. And what I'd love to ask is kind of, so I'd love to know kind of where, when you started your facilitation journey, like what were you facilitating? Like, what were the groups you were working with or the content that you were doing? And if that's changed, kind of how it's changed. And I'll stop my question there, because that's a perfectly fine one question. So I'd love to know that, because then there's building things I want to add on top.
Sure. Okay. I think it started off at camp, really. I think that's where it really started, was facilitating experiences at summer camp, where it was more of an open-ended activity to support the children in exploring an art project, the camp that I worked at was also on a farm, so it may have been a nature experience, and I think that's where the actual facilitation process started. And again, for me, I feel like I had the benefit of watching educators who really were going more for facilitating than teaching. And so seeing their impact, that's what part of what I was hoping to or attempting to model at summer camp, is not just answering the questions, but asking questions and posing questions to the group and holding as open-ended a space as possible for experimentation with appropriate boundaries. So I think it started there, and then moved into then facilitating groups of educators in their own learning process with respect to taking curriculum and engaging it in a classroom where you have learners that are from 17 to 70, and how to blend all the various learning styles that are happening in the classroom. So facilitating that kind of learning along with here's the curriculum and here's how you use it. I think it went there, and then simultaneously to that was introduced to the experiential education or the outdoor learning folks, the adventure learning folks. And that was one of those just like, whoa, you know, we can put people up on these high cables or do these challenge elements on the ground, and learning is happening constantly, and I'm not going to be the one to tell them what they learned, but hold the space for that to emerge. So all of those pieces, I kept growing, evolving, learning as I deepened as a human being myself and matured as a human being, and that process has not ended. Yeah. that continues, and you know, I have humbling moments. I'll go back to something you said really, really early, is that something about the difference between adults and children, I think also, which is sometimes a little scary for facilitators, is that the unknown elements, the wild card element, is so much more alive in groups of youth and children. And I think that's where I said, you know, a good facilitator really makes friends with improv. Anyway. Yeah,
that's super real. Sorry, Sam, did you have something you wanted to jump on there? Okay. I was gonna say, so my next question is kind of like, how do you describe the facilitation that you do now to other people? Like, how do you describe it?
That's a great question. I think it really depends on who's asking the question.
Okay. I'm asking the question.
You're asking the question.
We'll go with me first, and then we can throw in a different.
From a facilitation standpoint, again, the term transformative or transformational facilitation is one that I borrow from one of my mentors, Vanessa Stone, and I want to give her credit. World-class facilitator of helping groups take on hard work and shift it into something that becomes palpable, relevant, personal development, and thus group development, right? That's some deep facilitation right there, and she's one of the masters of it. So I like to use that term because whether I'm working with a group of 4th graders or educators or C-suite folks, my intention is that whatever work we're doing, new understanding emerges from inside the person and the people that helps them connect better to the other people in a more functional, heartfelt way.
Cool. That's great. And
when you think back, oh, go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead, Sam.
I was going to say, when you think back to summer camp, so it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think that's that is one of these core like facilitator experiences that I've never had. I was never a participant in summer camp or like a camp counselor, but I've talked with a lot of people, and for them that was kind of like their, you know, their foray into that. What did you learn in summer camp that helps you do that with C-suite level executives, right? Like, what lessons are you still calling back to from that farm-based summer camp?
Right on.
When you're meeting with a chief executive and, you know, chief financial officer, you're like, oh, this is just like summer camp.
Well, there's a couple things, and if some of my clients hear me say this, we're not hiring him again. It's not that I walk into the C-suite and look at them all as 5, 6, 10-year-olds. But I do remember that human beings love to play, right? And if the authentic sense of playfulness can enter a situation, it can be a bridge to so much learning and understanding, and also an invitation to taking off so much of that frontal persona that adults tend to bring when they're in group situations, right? So playfulness, I think, would be one of the lessons. I think the second piece is that that everybody, I'm going to make a blanket statement, everybody has this tender heart, and that ultimately human beings want to feel understood, heard, welcomed, and so safe. And that doesn't go away when you are 60 and a seasoned CEO of an organization, because you're still a human being. Now you may have separated oneself. I may have separated myself from that. But pretty soon inside there is that sense of that's what I'm after, because my neurology's wired that way. I can't get too far away from that. I think those two would be the key pieces.
What?
Now, a caveat on that is that I also still need to meet the individuals and the groups where they are. So I wouldn't placate a group of adults and enter a culture where that isn't what the primary modus is. I wouldn't come in with that overtly, because that could be seen as insulting to or not respectful of what's happening in front of me right there. It may be something that I sit in a deeper way, but it wouldn't necessarily be how I would roll off the top with a group, because I still have to find that place of invitation and also build a sense of trust with the group as quickly as possible, and how to do that still being authentic and at the same time honoring who that group is and what their culture is. Man, that's an ongoing learning of magic, but that's a key piece.
Yeah.
So I have like 3 burning questions just from that last like 2 minutes. So my first one is like, are there any go-to techniques or activities or even like framings that you use when you're working with adults where you want to integrate that level of play or fun, but you also want to respect that that's not their norm, right? Is to do that. Is there anything you do to build that trust, like in your first 20, 10, 5 minutes, that you're like, I use this 50% of the time, or I love this one when it works? Like anything come to mind? Because I think that is one of the hardest things to do and one of the most important.
Right. I get prior agreement by whoever hires me, let's start before I even get into the room.
Awesome.
So I let people know that my style is not didactic, and I'm not going to be if you want a trainer that's going to rock PowerPoints for the next 6 hours, I should not be the person you hire. Because I am going to invite people to get up and do stuff. And I have a conversation with them about, I'm setting up a safe space. I don't want people to run screaming or crying from the room. So it's not confrontive, but at the same time, we're going to do some work. I don't want the group to leave being the same group they came into the room being, because then I don't really feel like I did much. I could stay home and you could just mail me the check. Here's some activities you can run.
And what are the ways, do you ask them to communicate that to the group, or are you just like hoping that they know who they're hiring? Like, what are the ways you kind of hope they use that information?
I hope that they communicate that to the group, but I cannot guarantee that they communicate that to the group. So I'm still very sensitive when I engage, and I'll make that clear up front to the group. And I let people know, we'll do some work, but this, it may be uncomfortable, but it won't be confrontive. And so I'm letting folks know that ahead of time. So there's a couple of things that I do as far as activities to help seed that. One of them is an activity where I have people do this. You know that one?
Yeah.
And then they have to go from this to some other position. Yeah. And that's a great one to simulate. You know, when you come back here, it feels like ah, and you come back here and it's uncomfortable. But in which position do you notice your fingers more? So that one seems to work with just about every group, as far as like we're going to parlay into where we're heading here, and most folks then get that, right? Most adult groups that want to do some learning growth will get that. Another activity that I use, it's an oldie but goodie, man. It's called Helium stick. Are you familiar with that one?
I'm maybe.
It's
tell us anyway.
the one with the bamboo. That's the one. That's it. That's it, Sam. That one. It is. I mean, I continue to, every time I have a group, I'm like, man, I don't want to use this one again. Everybody knows this one. Hello, they don't even know it. You know, like last week I did it with a group, and it was just that thing again. I went back and forth, back and forth. I had the materials with me, and it just energetically, that intuition was like, no, I think this is going to go over with the group. No one in the room knew it.
Can you explain it in case somebody watching doesn't know
Sure. It? So you can find YouTubes all over the place with it, but it's the one where you have a group of 6 to 8 people, and they have their I'm standing in a line, my partner's standing across from me in a line, their fingers coming here, my fingers here, so our fingers are alternating all the way across, and then you lay a bamboo pole or a tent pole across all the fingers, and they have to lower the pole to the ground without any fingers coming off of the pole. So the immutables that I set up are that all fingers must be in touch with the pole at all times, and you can't break the plane of the pole, meaning if the pole is here, my finger couldn't come above the pole, right? Those are the 2 immutables that I rock, and that I find that it brings in playfulness, but it also gets right down to the heart of, how am I listening? How am I communicating? Do I really care about the other people on my team? What is the process that we have when we align to coordinate our action? What's the way that we make a plan or not make a plan? Do we make assumptions? I mean, like all the key, like high-level things that people always want to talk about, boom, right there. But it's also attached to behavior. And that for me is a win, because I didn't have to say, watch for this, because they saw it happening. It's like, all right, it was in the room. There it was. Let's talk.
Awesome. Thank you.
Meg, and for anybody else, the reason why that I used to use that when I ran orientation trainings, when I worked with orientation leaders. The reason why it was a go-to for me as well is because it's one of those ones that always leads to failure, but in a really like low risk. People fail and they laugh, and they fail and they laugh, and they fail and they laugh, and they fail because, Meg, I don't know if you recognize it yet, but like it's just by putting pressure on the pole, it goes up. Hence the name Helium stick. People are trying to get it to lower, and they end up raising it. What do you think? So Solomon, you were mentioning like a few of those issues around like the inauthenticity or the ways that people guard themselves, especially adults, and maybe especially in the workplace, and maybe especially people in a higher level, like the C-suite of the workplace. What are some other things you do to help crack through those guards that people put up? I think Helium stick is a great way to do it. Are there other things that you do to try to like crack through that? People wanting to be perceived as right, people wanting to be perceived as experts, whatever it might be.
Sure. One of the pieces of conversation that I try to bring in is, whether it's through an introspective activity or an interactive, where I'm relating with somebody else, to get folks to zero in on how they define excellence. Like, forget the job, forget the organization. I try to help folks have a conversation and an anchor to, what's my personal high road? And so then, if that's what I'm wanting, is to be who I can be because you know, somebody that I aspire to. So sometimes I'll ask who inspires them and why, and who in their life has really exhibited excellence that they want to model, and what are the reasons specifically to do so. That conversation helps to ground the facilitator. I'm saying we need to step this up. It's not because anybody's doing anything wrong or bad. It's because, hey, remember, we've all got this deep commitment to our own personal excellence and raising the bar on who I am as an individual. So if I'm doing that individually, guess what happens when we do that as a group or as a team? So that seems to also be a nice entrance conversation or an entrance point to help set a context for doing that level of work. Did I answer the question, Sam?
Yeah, for sure. I just like when you have that conversation, do you highlight the differences people hold as expectations for excellence? Do you highlight the common ground? Do you do both, neither? Like, how do you host that conversation?
Again, I think in our humanity, there's so many shared elements of what that sense of excellence, or somebody who has gone ahead of us, who has inspired us. There's so many shared elements that I typically just allow folks to raise those, and everybody in the room is nodding their head. And every once in a while, someone will say something different, but it's not different in the sense that people in the room go, well, I wouldn't get with listening. You know, it's almost like, I didn't think about that. That person was a good listener. Yeah, that's something I want to do too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, makes sense.
One question I have, Solomon, is so before we got into talking about like the activity, you said, keeping in perspective that people are human, right? That like the kid at summer camp is human and the C-level executive is human. And I really feel like that's genuinely difficult sometimes, right? That it's easier to treat people as their role, right? Or as their person in the industry, right? You're a tech person, you're an education person. It's a lot easier to do that than to be like, that person is a person with a tender heart who doesn't want to look dumb in front of the group. Right? Because at least I struggle with that as a facilitator. So
Sure.
Are there any ways that you remind yourself of that, or ensure, like when you're looking at a curriculum that you're developing or a workshop you're creating, or you're in the room with the group, that you are like, am I treating these people as humans? Am I approaching this group as humans? Is there any way that you kind of check in with yourself to ensure that you're doing that?
Yes, I think there's a constant check-in happening with myself. And that's one of my greatest facilitation tools, is a deep breath. And I recommend it, and I encourage groups to do it. And I learned from a gentleman named Tom Leahy, who does a lot of adventure facilitator training for ropes courses and such. And he created a something called team breath. And even if I don't introduce it to a group right away, somewhere in there I'll get that happening because of the physiology of what goes on. So I use that as my own tool to keep checking in. But I think, again, this is just, the more I do my own personal work, the more I'm able to not get thrown off of my center when somebody in front of me is uncomfortable and doing everything they can to put their ego or their persona up and knock me over, because I might be the I might be the threatening element in the room, right? And that's just, again, one doing one's work. I have to do my own work so that I don't buy that.
Yeah.
And I'm not confronting the other person. But this is where doing, and Vanessa says, standing unwavering in my truth, right? It's not that I'm rooted to my spot like a steel pole. There is a sense of flexibility as a bamboo rod. And at the same time, I am rooted in that sense of, yes, and this is a human being in front of me. And so what helps me stay anchored to that is doing the work that I need to do, I have a meditation practice that supports me in slowing down enough to be able to see, sense, and feel things. And also, what else? Just checking in, just doing regular check-ins. How's my belly feeling right now? How's this area? Am I noticing, am I clenching in my jaw? Are my eyes staying up like this and not going back down? Where are my shoulders? You know, what nervous movement? Like doing the rhythm facilitation stuff really helped me do a lot of body awareness, because there's so much body vocabulary happening in that kind of facilitation. I have to be really clear with what it is that I'm trying to say with my body, because you got 100 people on drums and they can't hear what I'm saying. So I have to be very clear. So if I'm nervous and I'm making funny movements, the group is not going to know what the heck I'm saying. So that practice helped me just do body check. But I think whatever practice one needs to do to be able to do a scan internally and notice, you know, I'm really squeezing the pen right now. What's happening? I can take a deep breath and relax. Like those kinds of things help me stay with, I'm in a room with other humans.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah. So Tom, it's such a common theme for you is that personal development, right? Like you're seeing these two paths, like or maybe you see more than two paths, but I keep hearing these two paths. There's your own internal development, and then the ways that manifests with the group experiences you're able to create or not create, maybe based on growth that you've accomplished or the learning edges that you know you still need to like edge out on. Yeah. I think it's really beautiful because it's the relationship between your relationship with yourself and your relationship with the groups that you're facilitating. And I know that there are plenty of facilitators who only focus on that second part, who don't necessarily see personal growth as potentially their responsibility. They see themselves as very much for the group. Does that make sense so far?
I think what I hear you saying is that that a lot of facilitators are more focused on what they're doing in the room with the group, what technique they're using, yeah, or strategy they're employing.
Or like exclusively, like that's the only thing that they see as their responsibility as facilitators. That's what I was hearing from you, Sam?
For sure, yeah. And so with that in mind, like what would be, like, how could you, I know it's, I don't want to frame this as like, how would you convince somebody that personal development is important?
Invite.
I guess, why for you is that so important? And can you explain that in a way such that somebody who was like, that's just not my job. There's no part of me that needs to be meditating or needs to be doing personal growth. I'm here about group development and I'm here for them. And like, okay, right. So, all right.
I think life becomes,
help me see your way.
And I would never, you know, what I would, let me finish that statement. I would never force that on anyone. What I would say is life is going to be the perfect teacher. You know, the moment I am in a situation where I was just like, oh my God, I don't know what to do here. That's the moment that I know if I have an internal spaciousness and a place that I can relax into, that's the moment where I can relax back and go, I don't need to know. What I can do is pause and take a deep breath and ask a question. Or pause long enough to sense what's happening in the room and ask the question to get the group back into like, hey, remember y'all, it's your work. I'm just here as a catalyst, right? So I would say that would be one of the things that I would engage is, have you ever been in a situation where you just felt like you had no idea what to do? That's a really good opportunity for developing internal self-reflection. Another piece would be, you know, if I think of any professional, whether that's an actor, an athlete, I look at the way that those people who are just superb at what they're doing, none of them are focused on just the external mechanics. An amazing actor is a deeply self-reflective person who is studying all the time and knows how to authentically connect internally, so that whatever emotion they're expressing, when you see them express it, you're just like, you're with them, right? Versus somebody who can see is faking it. And that draws me in. The same thing with an athlete. They don't spend their time just on the mechanics. There's all of the, as they call it, the psychological element to high performance athletics so that they can stay in the zone. Same thing with a musician. It's not just running scales, it's what's the heart of the instrument and the heart of the expression through music that they're bringing. I would say it's the same thing for facilitation, man, that if I tap into those elements, what I bring into the room is so much richer than I just learned this really great technique. But what happens if the technique bombs? You know, what do I have to back it up?
Is there anything, so this is something that I think that I've been recognizing and wanting to cultivate for myself, is that like, if I'm able to be fully present in myself, then there's like a new level that I can start achieving with the group. And something I'm finding currently kind of challenging around that is getting into a really clear or focused or centered headspace before doing a workshop. Because so often, like, you know, you're prepping stuff, or the people who brought you in are like, can I get you any, you know, like there's so much action before a workshop. And I'm wondering, what's that?
The Google Hangouts? No, go ahead.
Yeah, Google Hangouts crashing. You know, like they're insisting, do you need this PowerPoint? And you're telling them for the 15th time, like, that's not my technology, I promise. The chairs in the circle, that's all we need, right? And I'm wondering, like, are there ways that you get yourself prepped to go into a workshop, or even that like you intentionally open the space in order to create that kind of like deep sense of presence in yourself?
Yes, I would say, again, this is just the blessing of having some amazing mentors, and watching how they come into the space. And that, you know, I've watched them have the experience of the moment they enter, even if it's an hour ahead of time, there is stuff and people happening right up to the moment they step into this facilitation, and they're still in the zone, right? And so as I've uncovered that, what I've discovered is that they're not just doing it then. That they come into the room with a practice of internal spaciousness. And that's why, to me, a meditation practice has been so supportive, because I'm a high energy person. And so I don't want to lose my center in that high energy. The more I practice, again, just like any muscle, that I can come into the room, and if I didn't have those 10 minutes before I go on to take the deep breaths, well, I've been deep breathing since I woke up that morning, right? So there we go. So I'm relatively good to go. I take one deep breath and it taps me back into the reference point of how I want my nervous system to feel, because I've been practicing it. It's like a muscle memory thing. There was something else I was going to add to that. I think it flew away, and it'll come back.
It'll come back.
Trust that it'll come back. So what type of meditation do you practice? And if somebody, like if a facilitator were listening to this and they've never meditated before, what would you encourage them to do as like a first step with facilitation meditation in mind?
I should be clear that, you know, through my 25 plus years of facilitating, it was only in the last 5 to 6 years that meditation has really become, oh, I get it, right? It was kind of off and on before that. You know, the truth is it can be, it doesn't have to be any particular kind. I find that what works for me is just the ability to get still and practice keeping my mind from running to the next thing. And that's just practice. Like, I'm not a meditation expert. I wouldn't teach a meditation class myself. I just know that continuing to find time to sit and breathe and be, and practice scanning my body and feeling where tension is and bringing relaxation to that, and just taking another breath. in that practice of, oh, as soon as tension arises, I realize that that can be almost my Pavlovian response to tension, is a breath and a relaxation of my nervous system. Like any kind of meditation practice, I think will get to that. And I haven't tried them all, obviously. So at this phase, I wouldn't prescribe any particular one. I also happen to be married to an amazing and phenomenal facilitator herself. And I watch her and the way that she works, and she's very inspiring to me as well. And so, and she's had a meditation practice much longer than I have, and has the ability to really just calm and ground herself. And so part of watching her was also an inspiration for me as well in the process of it. And of course, it helps to have somebody else who's committed right in my household, because then we can, practice those things together.
100%.
Yeah,
she might be more specific about the kinds of meditation practices one could engage. I would just say mostly it's just get still and get quiet and practice bringing your mind to right now and the breath going in and out. There's so many practices and methodologies. Google it and you'll get at least a few 100,000 YouTubes you can watch.
I think sometimes the paradox of choice comes up for me in that, of like, especially around meditation, is like people are like, just do any of the millions, right? And and then you're like, oh, I have to find the right one, instead of just being like, and that's something for me that I've like, I used Calm, the app. And the reason I do is mostly so that I don't get in my head about finding something better. I've just been like, nope, just turn on the app and do the thing, because otherwise I end up on YouTube being like, oh, I don't like that meditation. I don't like that meditation. And that's not helping anybody. That's not stillness. It's the opposite, right? Like
that's meditation gone consumerism.
It is like literally what I'm trying to prevent, right? Is the like constant seeking of betterment through the perfect. Like, that's not what I'm just trying to do the opposite. So.
Right.
Yeah, if there's anybody who's like, what is the right, just pick one and keep doing it.
That's the key.
And that's it. Like, and if you don't like it, at some point change it.
That's
Go ahead, Sam.
It's more the discipline of doing it than it is even the actual one, right? It's really, don't be holding your breath while you're doing it.
Even like the first 15 seconds of just like, I have decided to do this. I know I could skip the next 10 minutes. It's literally the fact that I took the 15 seconds at the beginning.
That would be, that's another piece, is not like, oh my God, now I have to sit for 60 minutes. It's do it discipline for 5 minutes a day. Find this 5 minutes to do it and let it expand out from there. Just the discipline of doing it.
Yeah, it's funny because the reason why I asked that question is because of all the things that y'all just said. Like, I think that when people answer it, they often give this really broad, like non-judgmental, don't want to pick favorites, like just find the meditation that works for you answer. And I feel like that's often so like paralyzing for people hearing it, because they're like, oh, now I have to, if I'm going to meditate, I need to find the one that's right for me. Like, what does that involve? Like, do I need to go to different Tibetan like monasteries? I don't have money to so I think that having someone tell you this is the right one. What's odd is in so many other walks of life, I feel like that was bad advice. But when it comes to meditation, just if someone's like, this is the right one, just do it and trust the process for a year. Like, odds are it's gonna be fine. It'll be okay.
Even like just find a person who meditates all the time, start dating them, and then just do their meditation practice. Like that seems to be Solomon's method. Is like find a partner who does meditation, do that meditation, call it a day. I doubt that was a criteria, but anyway. So, Solomon, one phrase that you've said a couple times that I'm like, even just the language is really resonating for me, is the non-confrontive, or like not being confrontive, but being uncomfortable. And I would love to know, like, what to you is like, when does something become confrontational or like cross the line of like, that's where I don't want to go? versus like, this is completely healthy pushback, resistance, feedback for people, right? Because like, you don't just want to be like, let's go for the laugh, let's go for the easy relieving moment. What is that like? How do you come up to that line and know where it ends?
Practice. No, I know. That's not fair.
Well, okay, so can you give me an example of like a time where you were like, that was too far, and then when you where you were like, that is okay, like even if you just were like, this is too much, this is not too much.
Yeah. So again, here's where the self-reflective element of it is just so critical, because we hear so much these days about emotional intelligence and EQ, and there's brilliant information within that body of work. So I think it really starts with self. And so as I'm leaning into a group or into an exchange, or a holding of a boundary, or asking the group to step up or take on some work, I'm having to monitor what is the impact of my language, my request, my mood, and really sensing the group. And so it's almost like the pushback radar, let's just call it that, right? Where I might begin to get some pushback, but is it an absolute no? Is it in the moment? Is it like, I don't know about this? That's where I'm just like, okay, I still have a little bit of headroom because I haven't gotten to the absolute no yet. And I wouldn't necessarily keep pushing, but I might hang out there, because that's an uncomfortable place, and that might become the new, like, let's work to that. And a group works to that, or an individual works to that, and all of a sudden it's just like, man, built some muscle there. That feels good, So what I'm feeling too is, where is the absolute no, where I am losing credibility because now it's about my agenda versus feeling what's happening in the group. And I'm breaking trust because I'm so focused on the outcome that I feel needs to happen versus what the group is physically and verbally telling me, either with their languaging or their vibe. And so that's what I'm listening for.
So earlier you were talking about that big shift of going away from being liked by the group to understanding your purpose and maybe pushing for discomfort even at the risk of not being liked. Would it be fair to rephrase or to put this into the same idea, that being liked might be pushing for the yes, like just really living in that yes, like wherever people are, and if they're in the maybe, being liked is, oh, how can I pull them closer to yes? And pushing for like transformative discomfort would be more moving away from the yes into maybe, I'm not sure, but I'm willing to do this. And no is pushing too far. No would be, I like what you just said of that's, no is, it's more about me than it is even about them. So it's maybe pushing them past the discomfort that they're willing to be on board with. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I would say that resonates. And that the key piece being not being my agenda of what I need to see happen in order for breakthrough to have happened, but to feel and sense, where is the group in order for breakthrough to have happened? That's really where it lies. And I'm a member of this group. And so what am I feeling and sensing in it? And this is where, Meg asked the question earlier that made me bring up kind of the presenter. I think it was you, the presenter versus facilitator thing. And again, this comes into play there of what's the agreement for why I'm in the room, and being respectful of that, and at the same time holding the space of, as a catalyst, let's bring some warmth or maybe heat into the room so that a chemical reaction happens and the group is thinking differently than when I got into the room. Otherwise, again, just send me the check, right?
Yep.
Yep. Oh man. I think that's really helpful. And what I love, Sam, about the thing that you kind of synthesized too, is that I love when things go full circle, where if you go too far to one side, you start coming back around. So if you go so far into yes, of like, I want this group to be so excited that they're just liking me, you end up with the same result of if you push them too far.
Well said.
I just think that's really beautiful. And also, like, now that image exists in my like brain, it'll be so much harder to avoid that reality of when I'm doing that in a workshop. So thanks, everybody. Something that I know you do, Solomon, is work with youth about becoming facilitators, or like working with educating youth to become facilitators. What is like, what do you do? What is that like, or what do you do in that? I don't even know the questions to ask yet, because I'd love to know just a little bit about what that looks like. Yeah.
So again, to quote Vanessa, that it's really a process of reach in, rise up, reach out. That's the process. And so in supporting young people, or anybody really, it starts off with self-reflection, with the introspective understanding of who I am. What are my triggers? What are my yeses and nos when I'm relating to other people? What is my, what's my authentic nature versus a personality that I've taken on to try to win smiles? It starts there. It starts with, how do I reflect in such a way that I can be and endeavor to be. Again, it's not about perfection, it's the ongoing process, right? That I can endeavor to be the most authentic, relaxed human I can be. And in so doing, expressing the nature of who I am. People talk about that, just be yourself, be yourself. Well, it's like, if I'm watching all these other people not be themselves, and I'm trying on all these things, what's the skill base required to be able to check in and go, well, yeah, who am I? How do I roll? So it starts there in that process. And then the rise up part of it, and I work in an organization where we actually have a youth leadership program called Rise Up. And all of these are elements of that. That the process then of rising up is being able to then feel and develop more and more comfort with the authentic expression of who I am. And for sure, that's a lifelong task. What I find, and what we have found, is that the earlier I start that, the more skill base I have with it before I get so much more conditioning, right? Before I get so much more further away from who I am, that the earlier I can stay with that core sense of me, and this is why I believe it works so well and so much more rapidly with young people, is that there's just less conditioning. There's less grooves in the neurology of the brain around who I should be and how I should do it. There's an easier sense of being able to let go and step back into myself. So that process is that self-reflection, that sense of then being able to stand in myself, and then being able from that place to relate to others who are in that context, and then relate to others who are not in that context. So that's the reach in, rise up, reach out. That's the short answer.
That's awesome. And it makes the
you mentioned.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
We can see it mentioned interactive rhythm. Is that how you describe that? Interactive rhythm, the drum circles and the ways that you use drum in facilitation?
Yeah, I specifically use interactive rhythm versus drum circles because it's not always just being in a circle with drums.
For sure. So we didn't really get to dive into that very much, but I'm wondering if there's like something you've learned from doing interactive rhythm that has affected your other facilitation, or something that you've learned that you think if every facilitator were to know it, it would improve their facilitation, regardless of what style or what groups they're engaging with. What's one thing that every facilitator could learn from interactive rhythm?
Oh man, there's so many. Let's see if I can find some of these. I mentioned one earlier. Yeah.
As many as you want, yeah.
I can list them off. That's part of it, as they come rushing in, right? The first thing that comes to mind is body awareness. Presencing oneself, presencing myself in my body. Huge. That's just huge. When I started to learn how to do interactive rhythm facilitation, there's so much happening, and it's happening so constantly, right? That if I'm not aware of how I'm moving my body and where I'm moving my body in space, I can trip over a percussion, literally, a piece of percussion that's sitting on the floor right next to me, and not be aware that somebody just came into the room and they brought an instrument that's not in sync with the others. And so right now I need to do some sort of intervention with the group that's playful, that lets everybody come back to, here's the pulse. So the second piece then is not just awareness here, but then feeling a group. Like, interactive rhythm is one of the most powerful ways to learn how to feel what's happening in a group, rather than having my own agenda about where the group should be. It's like, where's the pulse right now, right? What voices are speaking? Who's carrying the pulse? What's happening over in this side of the room? What's happening over in that side of the room? You can see me bouncing as I do that, because my body naturally goes into mirroring the pulse back to the group as a center sense, because usually I'm facilitating for doing a circle process in the middle, or if I'm in the front, I'm also mirroring back, here's the pulse, so that we all kind of stay on that together. So the body awareness, the sensing of the group, the clarity of communication is such a significant piece, because I can't be flailing my body. Just like I want to be sure with my words when I'm engaging a group, what's the very specific instruction? What's the very specific and clear question that I'm asking for them? What's the way that I want the group to unfold whatever this process might be, or the inquiry that I'm bringing to them. With interactive rhythm, I've got to be so clear, because as I mentioned earlier, there could be 20 to 200 people, and they're not going to hear what my words are, even if I have a microphone. So how do I clarify that through the movement of my body and the body vocabulary, as I call it? I would say those are just the three core pieces that have been and continue to be significant takeaways.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I think that those often feel so abstract to people, and so intangible and inaccessible, and like, oh, you'll know it when you do it sort of things. And I really think that putting it into a rhythm setting, to me, makes it feel like, oh, that is something that's possible to do in that setting. And so if it is possible to do in that setting, then it can be transferable, which I really like, because those are three things that I think are important as a facilitator, and so often people think are just wishy-washy. Some people have it, some people don't.
Right.
Can't learn to read a group sort of thing.
Right. Oh, goodness. Whenever I used to do interactive rhythm facilitator trainings, I would invite people who facilitate anything for that specific reason, because it concretizes that skill base. Like, yeah, you can learn this. Anybody can learn this. And here's a very concrete kinesthetic way to start tapping into it.
For sure. That's great.
Awesome. So, Solomon, we have some questions that we like to ask all of our facilitator guests, and the only difference between like those last questions and kind of how we've been doing it is that we won't dig into anything that you say.
Okay.
So that's the only difference on our end. Sam, is there anything that you wanted to get into before we jump into those questions?
Oh, are you asking me? Sorry,
Yes.
you broke up a little bit.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was just checking to see if you're good with moving over there.
Trying to see who you're making eye contact to, but it's the same camera for both of us.
And we're all really good facilitators, so we're just like, let the silence roll, man. Let the silence roll.
That is a particularly powerful facilitation tool that I've learned more and more as I've grown in facilitation to utilize, is the power of silence. Ooh, that's like a strategic monster right there to use that. Anyway, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So Sam, are you good to move over there? Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So
I'll take the first one. So
great.
What are the 3 words that you would use to describe facilitation?
3 words to describe facilitation: adventure, journey, self-development. That was the last one.
Awesome. If you could pick one ground rule to apply to the entire world that everyone would have to follow, what would it be?
Wow, as cliche as it sounds, I think I'd use Covey's, one of Covey's 7 habits, and is seek first to understand, then to be understood.
I didn't hear that. Will you say it again?
Sure. It comes from Stephen Covey. It's seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Ah, I like that. That's very different from the other ones we heard for that question. What is something that you still need to be reminded of as a facilitator?
Just one thing.
One or the first 5, whichever, but you, yeah.
Oh, goodness. Let's see. To breathe. And then there's just a statement that I received from one of my mentors, which is, I exist, I am valid, I am enough.
All right. What do you do right before a facilitation?
Right before it starts, this reminds me of an answer that I remember flew away and it's now coming back. Is it okay to share that now?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is that a couple of the people that I've worked with as mentors talk about setting the field. And they literally, when they walk into a room, will engage and basically put good juju into the room. And have that space be, whether they're thinking it or saying it out loud, just saying, this space, this room is going to be a place where people are safe and breakthrough happens, and I'm inviting all of the good juju in this space to support me and everybody else in here to have our most powerful learning opportunity. So that's one of the things that I like to do right before I facilitate. And I like to do it usually right when I walk into the room. But if I forget to, I do it right then. And then there's always a deep breath.
Great.
Excuse me. And a scene. What do you do right after a facilitation?
I offer gratitude. Even if people are coming up to me right afterwards, I just take a moment right when the completion has happened and I offer gratitude.
What's a piece of facilitation advice you'd like to give your 5-year-ago self?
Breathing really works, and let go of having them like you. Just be you.
Yeah, that 5-year-ago self was right when you started to meditate more, if I'm remembering correctly. You're connecting all the advice. Okay, I'm breaking the rules. What still stresses you out as a facilitator, and what do you do to manage the stress?
I'm gonna sound redundant. People are gonna be like, "What's up with this dude and the breathing thing?" But that's how I know it really is. I mean, you can look up the research on what happens when you take a deep breath. It's like, get back in the zone, man. So I think the question was, what do I do, and what are the things that still? How did you language the question?
Stress you out. Yeah.
Stress me out.
Yeah. What still stresses you out, and what do you do to manage the stress? Yep.
Okay, so what stresses me out are situations where the internal culture of the group is very resistant. And not even just necessarily resistant to me, just that they've come into the room with resistance. I notice that is immediately a trigger. And I think the other piece, I would say that's it, resistance. That's probably the biggest one. Yeah.
So is breathing a strategy you'd use, or is there something that you do differently to manage that particular stressor? Breathing?
Yeah, breathing helps me remember not to take it personally, first of all, and then it also helps me remember if there's a question that I need to ask the group, and it also helps me remember to just go, hey, you guys, I'm feeling a lot of resistance, so let's talk about what's happening, because I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve your process. These are the objectives that we have, but I'm willing to go where we need to go. And if I'm not breathing, then it's almost like, oh my God, it's not happening. What do I need to do? This isn't working. And I forget all the things, so it's like, just take a moment of spaciousness. So helps me.
What is a unique place you have facilitated?
Let's see. Unique place I have facilitated. In a yoga studio in the jungle in Costa Rica.
Ooh, that counts.
Quite unique. Not judging these answers, but we.
And then also.
What's a directly facilitation related experience that you think every facilitator should have?
Your first part of the question cut off. Say it again.
What's a not directly facilitation related experience that you think every facilitator should have?
Be in a drum circle.
Yeah, I now want that experience. Yep. Okay. What book books do you recommend most to others?
Let's see. I just recently got a book by Tim Ferriss called Tools of Titans.
I was wondering if you were a Tim Ferriss
these days. What other books? Oh, there's one by Derek Sivers, who used to be the CD baby guy, and it's called Anything You Want. And that's a great one. I recommend that one a good bit. Probably those are my top two at this point.
Great.
Cool. Do you have any online resources that others can check out, either that you've created or that you browse a lot that you think people would benefit from?
I was just introduced to this great website called FacilitatingXYZ. It's a great resource. I find that like the resources of people like Peter Senge and Margaret Wheatley, I find the resources that are put out from an organization called Vital Smarts. They're the ones that wrote the book Crucial Conversations. Their stuff is fabulous, fabulous. The Covey information, still pretty solid. The information on emotional intelligence, there's a couple of websites on that. I'm not remembering specifically which one at the moment that I use as a go-to. Yeah, those are my top websites. Oh, then as far as like, because activities are great, you guys. So Chris Cavert's Fun Doing website, it's Fun Doing, as in what do you have fundoing.com, fundoing.com. That's a treasure trove of activities, and he's a wonderful trainer, and he's a great facilitator of activities and a trainer of people of how to facilitate activities. I consider him one of my mentors as well.
Cool.
Awesome.
And that's new to me.
And then there's a book coming out by Vanessa Stone on transformational facilitation, but it's not fully written yet, but watch for that one.
Awesome. Okay, and our last question is, if you had one piece of advice you have for everybody listening?
One's personal work and doing one's own self-reflective journey is the fastest way to engaging a fulfilling life with others.
That's great. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Well, are there ways that people can connect with you online? Like, do you do any social media, personal website, like any ways that if people are interested in your work or interested in you, they can seek you out?
I don't do as much social media as I should do. So my website is sourceconsultinggroup.com. And then also I work at the Amala Foundation, amalafoundation.org. So those are the two best ways to find me these days.
Great. We will put all of that, and there's a lot of links and books that you recommended, and we'll link all of that in the notes for this. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
It was
Thank
super
you.
fun. Yeah, I think that we've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes, and I know I could do another hour and 40 to go. So just want to thank you so much for all of your wisdom, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all you all are doing and making this available to support those on the journey. Please let me know how I can continue to be a resource.
Great. We will. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Have a good rest of your day.